All right, so I'll love to introduce Shawn Carolan. He's a great friend, a great visionary, a great investor, and let's put our hands together for Shawn.
Thank you, Ron, for having me, and for all of you for being here. It's an honor.
So quick intro on Shawn, right? He's not only invested in great companies like Uber, Siri, Roku, with great exits, but he has been devoted to the last literally a decade in the transportation revolution sector. So before I jump into I would like to tell a little story because Uber is a big part of this. And I'm not very proud of these stories, but I like to say anyways. It's a true story. So this is, Uber was created around 2010. And late in 2010, Shawn calls me up and he says, Ron, let's have drinks at Burke's in Santa Clara. It's a nice restaurant, it's good for drinks and get together. And I said, what's about? Well, I want to show you an app. I want to show you something, get your thoughts. You're supposed to know everything about mobile technology and apps. So, okay, we showed up there and we're seated at the bar. Shawn pulls the app and it's Uber. And he said, take a look at this, what do you think? I look at that, I said, what is this? He said, well, it's an app that it's like a taxi, but for strangers to carry on somebody else and get paid. And I look, I said, Shawn, I'm not gonna be riding with strangers, I'll tell you that. But he's a very UI-focused guy. He knows user interface and how the experience with the user really is defined. And he's looking the app, and it's a really cool app. Very simple and straight to the point. Bottom line, thank God he did not listen to my take on Uber, and here we are. But before we jump into Uber, and other jump bikes, Skip, all this great technology in transportation. Tell us a little bit about your vision, why the transportation sector, why your thesis in this transportation revolution.
Happy to. I'll tell a very short story about Ron as well. So he's a visionary. Sometimes there's a saying in the venture business, too early, too early, too early, too early, too late. And Ron started a company whose vision was to be the App Store before the App Store existed. So he had prepaid cards in retail. He had a web portal. The only problem was the phones all sucked. So when you pushed the button to download your game, it wouldn't download. So we all know how that game played out for the App Store, but very versatile entrepreneur who found a way through no matter what. So admire him. So transportation revolution, I wish I could say that, we had this crystal ball or on the whiteboard we said, taxi market needs to be revolutionized. That was not the case. I think the way investing has worked for me, and I think for many folks that are early, is just you're constantly looking for pain points in your own life or in the life of people you love and care about. David Kelly of IDEO calls this being an anthropologist. So you're seeing, what's happening that's not right. So, before turn-by-turn directions on your phone, you had this paper book out. I remember when I moved to Silicon Valley in 2000 from Chicago, and, you're flipping through these pages trying to find the grid, C6 is where the thing is, and then, you lose your page because you're driving, and it's a hassle. And so our very first investment in mobile technology was a company called Telenav. And I remember driving to San Francisco, and there was a big billboard up, and there was an arrow on it and said, use your phone for turn-by-turn directions. I thought, Jesus Christ, they can finally do that. I mean, it's so obvious. The phone is in your pocket, and, it sucks using the map, and so the phone should be able to do that. And so I went into a Sprint store and looked through the brochure, and then way down at the bottom was this company called Televigation. And, you look them up and pester the CEO, and finally we got an investment. So that was turn-by-turn directions. So it's processes like that. And so just the idea that, hey, GPS, I call these ingredient technologies. There's new things that show up in the computing platform that I think of as unlocking markets. So GPS is on the phone. All of a sudden, there's all these new things that unlock markets because people say, hey, it's a new market. there's not any new markets. And what I mean by that is human behavior patterns don't change. We evolve over, many millennia, not over years. And so like we need food, we need clothing, we need housing, we need transportation. What happens is these ingredient technologies unlock new capabilities to revolutionize the way in which those things are delivered. And so, for example, with Uber, nobody who lived in San Francisco at that time liked going to the corner and raising their hand and waiting for 15 minutes for a cab to, drive by until they did it again. And so, one of the young folks in the organization said, hey, I took this thing and it was pretty cool. And like most consumer things, the only way to really understand it is to try it. And so I tried it, and I think I was on the second floor over a third, and Bryant pushed the button, and I got to the curb, and there was a car waiting for me. And the door opened, got in, got to the place, and so it was kind of like, wow, existing behavior pattern, which is I have to move. People talk about pain points versus vitamins. When you are somewhere and you need to get somewhere else, you have no choice. Like your atoms of your body need to move, so you have no other choice but to move. And then you say, okay, well, if I can do that existing behavior pattern in a better, faster, or cheaper way, then I got a business. So that's what Uber did, obviously, unlocked, anybody over 16 who knew how to drive could become part of the labor pool. Anybody who needed to get to somewhere could become part of the customer base. And I think that sort of philosophy is extended now into the other transportation businesses as well.
Great. So we're talking about Uber, and let's deep dive on Uber a little bit. How exactly was the process for you, the make you invest in Uber? Was just the wow effect, or had something else at the time that says I must invest here because I know it's going to be successful?
It's part feeling, I think, when you touch you say like there's lots of consumer technologies all over the place, and what makes one explode? And it almost by definition, it has to be something. Most people don't give a crap about technology. They have their lives, and they're just trying to get through their lives and all of the needs I talked about before. So it was the feeling that I needed to get somewhere, and that was just the speed, right? I wasn't wasting time on the corner. I personally have, anxiety around like tipping and how much should I tip? Is that enough? And will they be mad at me? So like not having to tip was actually a big reduction in cognitive load. Now I just like over tip now that Uber has done well for the firm. But before that, it didn't feel like that. But so yeah, part feeling, part workflow, part, we actually modeled, if you look at the internal investment memo, we said, well, could you eat 25% of the taxi market? So we kind of missed on that because, if you say what it's become, it hasn't just replaced taxis. It's really changed, transportation and car ownership. So if I would have kind of stayed focused up on the need of just movement, it would have been much easier to, it felt like a stretch valuation at the time.
Can you share with us the investment and the actual return your firm has got on Uber?
Sure. So we led the Series B round. It was initially a $20 million investment, and then we bought out some more from insiders up to 26. And that now we participated in the SoftBank transaction with a little bit less than half of our stock, and had sold a little bit before that. So total now of realized return back to the fund is about $1.15 billion, and then we still hold over half of our stock. So you're
still a majority shareholder, one of the largest.
Not a majority.
Not majority. One of the largest.
One of the largest shareholders. And Vicente, keep up the good work. Looking forward to that. No, it's a fantastic. I'm just. You talked about moving fast, like Uber speed, and it truly is one of the most incredible execution machines. There's all this debate, idea versus execution, and my wife's also a venture capitalist, Reach Capital, and she's like, hey, it's all execution. I say it's both. Like Uber was a very good idea, and the team executed better than anyone I have ever seen in the history, certainly my career, just to get it worldwide and all the things. Obviously, many mistakes in execution as well, but still, the team deserves enormous amount of credit.
So far, easy questions, but let me jump into a tough one. I know Shawn very well. He invests in great companies, but he also invests in the founding CEOs, and he stays behind the founding CEOs throughout the life of the company. Uber had a big episode with Travis Kalanick, one of the co-founders and CEO at Uber at the time, that at one point was let go by the board. You, as one of large shareholders of Uber, how did you handle that situation, and what really happened?
Well, Sam Walton had this saying that he said, the only form of job security is happy customers, and they can, fire you or keep your job depending on where they spend their money. And, ultimately, I was not on the board at the time. So just, take this from, we were a major shareholder, and we were part of, if you followed it closely, this control of the preferred vote. So Benchmark, Menlo, lowercase capital, and First Round were all, essentially controlled the preferred vote. But, it's the type of thing you never, ever want to do. Companies performing well, and the management team is singing, et cetera. You kind of say, wow, all these things are going well. Why would you ever help catalyze a change? And it was essentially the customers, and I think of customers on the street, drivers in the fleet, and employees at the company. Like if all three of those constituencies aren't happy with the leadership, and you have to ultimately serve them. And so I think that's basically what it came down to is the early days and on through. I mean, there was many amazing things I think that Travis did as an entrepreneur. And if I think of what's happening in the scooter markets now and how they're having to ask for permission in every market, if he didn't have that, hey, we have to go penetrate these cities at lightning speed. If he was, knocking on city hall doors and stuff, it just, it never would have happened, certainly at the speed, or maybe not at all, when you think of like taxi lobbies and how much other things were going. Even though, happy customers, happy drivers, and better service, there was just a lot of red tape to cut through. So in many ways, that early part of the company was exactly what it needed to be unlocked. But there was cultural issues we all know about, and you look at someone like Dara, who has just run a company at scale like that, the amount of people, and what are the processes we need in place, and how do we make sure all these people get a voice, and pay discrepancies, and everybody's cultures are being respected, and all that stuff. And when you get to that scale, you have to be a world-class corporate citizen. You can't have the challenger mentality, and the transition just wasn't happening.
All right, I think Uber, great. Congratulations on the chip change, 1.2 billion. Maybe you can share with BayBrazil a little bit.
There you go.
Waiting for the right time, All right, so let's jump into jump bikes. I mean, bikes everywhere in the city. You invest in jump bikes. Just like a few months later, it sells to Uber for $200 million. I mean, how did you know? They raised like 11 million and sold for 200. Any conflict of interest being on both sides? And what was that all about?
No, of course not. No, I was on the board, so it was a great product. So what's the question? No conflict of interest.
No conflict of interest. Great. What do you think? What do you think about the electrical bikes? Better operated bikes. Is this something that's really going to happen?
So not to replay the broken record from before, but look, you say, what are the ingredients? So lithium-ion batteries, electric motors, GPS on the bikes, ubiquitous cellular connectivity. Like the idea that this vehicle, sub-$1,000 vehicle, is a little IoT device that can be roamed and found on your phone. Like those are relatively new things that unlocked this opportunity. And if you've ridden an e-bike, it's a truly delightful experience. You feel like, superpowers cruising through the streets, waving to people stuck in traffic on the bus, and, you're smiling, wind in your hair. So it's like, wow, that is awesome. I mean, and we actually did a race as part of our diligence, me against many of the associates. Okay, everybody pick your favorite mode of transportation. We'll race over to get this, meet this company. And I can't say I respected all the laws of traffic during that time, but I was on the jump bike and I smoked everyone. And it was $2, right? So you say better, faster, cheaper, same thing, existing behavior patterns. So, and in this case, the cities do matter a lot. And I think being a good corporate citizen, making sure pedestrians like you and the businesses like you and you're operating in a sustainable way is very important, because you need the permits from the cities, because you have your fleet on the street, and if they feel like you're bad, they can go around with a paddy wagon and impound all your stuff overnight. So you can't just go rogue the way you could with apps and phones and cars. And so Ryan, the CEO, was an incredible entrepreneur. He'd been an urban planner for 10 years and had been fighting this fight and leading the cause and getting bike lanes out there. So it was just the right combination of things. It's an incredible bike, the vehicle to kind of unlock. And so the one surprise was Uber introduced them to me to invest. Like, hey, these guys need some help and some money. Like, can you go, help? Which I was happy to do. But they thought they would just partner. The bikes would show up in the app, and they would always stay, because it's a capital intensive game. You got to buy bikes, you got to have them out there, you got to have fleet operations. It's relatively expensive versus being a software company. They thought they would just partner, but when we did that trial, and you might remember, they were the only ones approved at the beginning. It just started to grow like crazy on its own, because I think of the bikes as these mobile billboards with people smiling. And they're very, self-evident what this product does. And so they were growing, 1,000 new customers a day with no marketing, no partnership. And so Uber's like, maybe we ought to have that as part of the company instead of a partner. So
I was just a couple weeks ago driving from work, and I'm Los Gatos Boulevard on traffic. And I see this kid with a backpack, helmet, sunglasses, iPhone on a scooter, just going by the bike lane and just smiling, just like goodbye. And I'm looking at that kid and say, oh my, that is cool. Actually, I should be doing that instead of sitting in the traffic. So now skip electric scooters. I mean, scooters is dangerous. A lot of accidents probably will happen. It's growing like crazy in colleges. We see everywhere. Where is it going to go? I mean, how is it going to be regulated, do you think? Is the city going to allow on the bike lane scooters to just go by 30 miles an hour? Or how all this is going to happen?
I don't know, is the honest answer. Exactly. What I do know is there was a lot of regulation around the bikes, because bike share had been around for a while. And in fact, Motivate, the company Lyft bought, that has the Ford Go bikes here, and in New York, the city bikes, most of the regulation, which takes many years to pass, was written around stationed bikes. And so that's, law does not keep up with technology. And so, no one saw electric scooters coming. And so there's like no regulation around them. But when the cities saw it coming, they said, hey, cease and desist. Nobody can be on the streets, at least in San Francisco. And each city is basically handling it in a different way. Skip, which is the company that we've invested in, I'm on the board of, was one of the two people who got granted the permits, them and Scoot, who does the electric scooters. And it was because of this kind of city first friendly, hey, let's figure this out. Because what you don't want in an emerging market is for everybody to get angry about it and hate it. And safety is a huge issue, right? You don't want people getting hurt and ended up in the hospital. And so I'm for one, I'm in favor of that kind of slower, more methodical approach, measure twice, cut once, and get it right. But yeah, the idea is use the bike lane, you can imagine, the evolution of the vehicle. These are still Gen 1 vehicles, what will that look like? Lock to, you could even have cameras for like audit logs, who was in fault in an accident. You could have a downward facing camera that detects if you're on the sidewalk or not and slows it down to 2 miles an hour. I mean, there's all these things you could do over time if you're in control of the vehicle, and that's what we liked about Skip. But I think, again, consumer behavior talks. And I had a similar feeling to you when we invested in Jump. It was, we knew about some of the emerging scooter companies too, so tried it all. And I was in Burlingame with my first scooter ride, and I said, wow, one, that was fun, and two, I'm like a snowboarder and a motorcyclist, and I almost felt like I was going to die. So, I can't even imagine that being in the city, potholes, pedestrians, all that stuff. So I had to choose, and we chose obviously the Jump bike as the vehicle. But, these things showed up, and people are just going much shorter distances. It's kind of, 1.5 miles. It's more replacing walking. Whereas opposed to the bikes, which are like up to 5 miles, have replaced more short Uber rides. The scooters and with heels and dresses and, whatever you're wearing, you can get on them. They're very approachable. $1 to start riding, 15 cents a minute. It's just a super easy, low cost way. So the numbers are talking. And if you look at the revenue per scooter per day, that versus the bikes, it's higher right now. And then you think if the whole system has to work, the logistics, you can actually put 5 scooters into your trunk, take them home and charge them. You can't do that with bikes. So the fleet operations ends up being a lot lower cost as well.
I really wonder now with Uber buying Jump bikes, if Uber in Brazil is such a big market for Uber, we just heard it's the 4th largest market. If they're going to bring the electrical bikes to São Paulo and other cities in Brazil, that would be funny to see, huh? The people with the pedestrian. I mean, everybody follows the rules so nicely in São Paulo, we know how that goes. All right, it'll be good for the healthcare system. I had a panel earlier.
That's right. I'm looking at teledoc companies too now.
That's right. You invest on the security side. Okay, just a couple. We have, Margarita, 5 more minutes. We have 2 more topics, and then we jump into some questions. And perfect. So Apple. I mean, it's a tough one here. We can be short, but Shawn invested in a company called Siri. Everybody knows what it is, voice recognition. In the very early days, when the app didn't existed, he helped the company really get their feet on the ground, develop the app, and then as soon as they put the app out, Apple came and bought the company. So Apple now became a big hit for iPhone. iPhone makes Apple $1 trillion plus. What is next? Do you see more technology that can evolve iPhone to the next level and keep making Apple richer and richer? We didn't plan this question, but I wanted to ask anyways.
Again, I don't know.
You probably know more than us. That doesn't
keep me from having an opinion. So I believe in the singularity, if anybody knows what that is. Ray Kurzweil, I think it's the only book over 500 pages I've ever finished. But, that basically humans and computers over the next 100 years will be melding. And you kind of see it in increasing scale. But I really do believe that all of the really disruptive innovations come at that human-computer interface. It's just a little bit easier. Amazon, a little bit faster. I get this recommendation, 1 click, I get that good. I don't have to go to the store anymore. Like, you keep moving towards the computing fabric supporting us. And again, in those same categories of needs in a better, faster, and cheaper way. So I think what Apple, say, like, what's the core innovation that got Apple to be $1 trillion ahead of any other technology company? I actually believe it's design. They really were the first and only technology company that said, like, we need absolutely world-class design. This anthropologist, and you think of an iPad or an iPhone, it's like, afterwards, it seems kind of obvious. Like, boy, it should have this, it should be super simple, and it should have intuitive, and I should be able to use my fingers for stylus, and little simple details, like as I move my finger, the screen needs a refresh rate and a sensitivity that makes it feel like a piece of paper, like it becomes very intuitive to my mind because I'm used to, when I touch this badge, it moves exactly the way I'm expecting it to. Like that's how humans work. So if I say, what are the next big categories for Apple? I do believe, I'm sure they're looking at VR and, Oculus and Vive and kind of, laughing at these monstrosities around our heads that, there's something there, but it's just, it's not a mainstream thing. So I guarantee you there's a VR project, there's AR projects, there's like all this stuff that's in labs right now that designers are working on and engineers are thinking, okay, how do I get it into a super sexy pair of glasses? But like, they're just not going to launch it until it's awesome. That's what I think Apple does best, is they just keep refining it until it's to the level of quality and usability that everybody in this room could just, hold it in their hands and not need an instruction book and take it on. So that I do think, using your hands is going to be an interesting user interface. Voice, obviously a little bit disappointed with what they did with Siri inside of Apple. But, they're just so great at looking at what you're doing and making it better.
So we had an earlier discussion with entrepreneurs and Kubo, which is a partnership between Redpoint Ventures, Itaú, and a huge success for entrepreneurs in Brazil. And you were at Menlo Ventures, you invest in Uber, you left to open your own company called Handle. You were there for a while doing two jobs, Menlo and Handle. Came back to Menlo full-time, and you launched just recently, a couple months ago, Nexus. Tell us a bit about Nexus and how it helps entrepreneurs, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs here that may be interested in it.
So yeah, I'll try and keep it short, but happy to follow up on it. So I had a good job as a venture capitalist and had a startup idea, which was that, email, where you see people spend half of their lives at work in their email inboxes, did not map to your goals and what's important in your life. And so we tried very hard to create a system that integrated your email to-do list and calendar to help shift that. And can be summed up by saying we were trying to sell broccoli in the crack neighborhood. So it's a beautiful system that, only the most enthusiastic productivity hackers like myself wanted to actually use. But I learned an enormous amount. One was like, empathy, product. I mean, I could talk about all sorts of things, the entrepreneurial journey, how hard it is, where founders really need to be supported and what a good board member does. You don't come up with new ideas, for example. You got plenty of good ideas. It's like, okay, who's in charge of that initiative? And do we need to hire someone? And can I help you interview and find, Ron needs, more good people around him to lead new ideas. So, shifts like that was immense. But another big one was just how hard it is, the monumental effort it takes, both, time, energy, resources, ego hit, support from your family, convincing spouses and kids, like, hey, just let me go disappear into a hole for a couple of years. Like, it takes truly like a Herculean effort to start a company. And if you go back to first principles, what are the things that should be really hard? Well, finding the right idea and in a crowded market where you have trillion-dollar technology companies trying to serve our needs, like, it should be hard to come up with new breakthrough ideas. And it should be hard to really think hard about this big idea. How do we have the first MVP that we can build with a 2-pizza team and launch it and have a growth model and a good business model? Like, those are hard things, and they take time. It should be hard to do those things. It should not be that hard to find other people who are interested in solving that problem with you. It should not be hard to find advisors who are also like interested in the idea and want to help smart young entrepreneurs, but have a full-time job they can't quit. It should not be hard to get some playbooks on how to start your company from the beginning. And I've been on the board of a company called InView for 13 years, where the lean startup was born. So a bunch of strategy piece. And then the last one is capital. If there's a big, exciting category, and if you have a good MVP to get started in that category, then you should be able to get money pretty easily. And so that's what Nexus was born, partly of my personal frustration starting Handle inside of Menlo, but partly of just looking at entrepreneurship in the world and saying, if us as a firm could bless categories and say, yes, if you get something working in here, I know the capital markets will show up to fund you because it's a big opportunity and you can spin it into a good story and get people aligned. So we bless categories with these, $1 million bounties, and we say this is a big category, and then essentially become a vertically oriented social network where people who are star individual contributors, so you're a designer, you're a product manager, you're an engineer, or you're an advisor, you start to align with those folks. We call it being in orbit. And then eventually, hopefully, someone will pitch an idea that fits into the category, and we're just sitting there waiting with the checkbook in hand. And sorry I didn't bring it for BayBrazil today.
No, that's actually perfect that we have some entrepreneurs here, and maybe BayBrazil can help bridge them to Nexus and hopefully get Nexus, your checkbook, going a little faster.
Right. Nexus.menlovc.com is the current URL. So you sign in with your LinkedIn password or whatever, the OAuth, and so Chaz is the guy who's running for Menlo, and I can see your profile and see if you're the right kind of profile, and then off from there.
Great. Let's open up to the audience here. Any questions on the transportation side? All right, let's get started.
Where do you see personal transportation with drones in the near future or long term? And how would you invest in the reimagine the landscaping to actually accommodate this kind of transportation to the cities? Because it's something that you just like thinking about bikes and cars, but you're thinking about a completely redesign of how people actually foresee transportation in the near future.
So this is one of those things where you say, I put it in the category of technological inevitability. It will happen. It's just, when and how. Taking to the air, there's not a whole lot of traffic up there. It can be faster. So yes, is the short answer. I do believe strongly it will happen. It's also, very early, right? There's FAA regulation, there's cities, but, Kitty Hawk is a project I followed. I think it was a Google Alphabet project where it started out as a personal drone and they were flying over lakes as a kind of a fun toy as their MVP. And the most recent one I saw, I think it's called Cora now, but it's both the VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. So kind of drone technology to get off the ground, and then forward propulsion with a wing in order to get to kind of speed. And, it's electric powered, so you need battery. The batteries need to last for a reasonable sized trip. So I'm excited about it.
Would you be something that you would be investing?
Yeah. I mean, if you have an answer. The one thing, because you did say ecosystem, I don't know if you're building an aircraft or the ecosystem. There's a lot of people who try to build ecosystems too early. And you have to solve a problem. That's like if you think of these self-driving cars, for example, there's a lot of pieces that have to come together before self-driving car actually adds any value. And all of the fleets that have a human sitting there are not adding any value yet because the human could just be driving, right? So you think of like all the pieces have to fit in place to solve a problem before. So that's a lot of I think the VC time horizon, which is, I got to see some progress in 1 or 2 years. You don't have to solve the whole thing in 1 or 2 years, but you have to make progress in 1 or 2 years to fund, just to be careful in this, because it is such a big deal, how big of a bite you try and take with the startup. I'd love to learn more.
Next question. Anybody? Oh, we're good. Vicente.
Actually, piggybacking a little bit on the ecosystem type question, right? So the ride sharing has been around for a while now, and so do you see that ride sharing is creating any ecosystems on top of it, or even like the new modes of transport, like electrical scooters, things like that? Are we going to see changes in, I don't know, like people making disposable helmets, right? Those types of things that maybe you're going to need. In Brazil, it's kind of interesting. A lot of the Uber drivers, and I think there was a company doing that as well. They would have like almost like a little vending machine inside the Uber, right? So do you see that some of these things are gonna happen, or anything interesting?
Definitely, and it is. So there's one in the U.S. I know of is called Cargo, and it's kind of turnkey. Put it in there. There's another one that was a YC company, which was these like sorry for whoever's running the company, but obnoxious billboard on top of the car, and they basically pay rent, $200 a month for you to drive with this, Vegas style sign on top of your car. I just didn't want to see that in the world, so I wasn't going to invest in it. What else? A lot of the gig economy stuff. So how do you, get healthcare for drivers and background checks that are more automated and safer? How can people who want to have multiple gig economy jobs manage their time better? So I do feel like the whole ecosystem, we're represented obviously transportation, but more this flexible workforce, which is I can, click in, be productive, and then click out. And I think it's a wonderful thing for the economy and a lot of people who don't have the flexibility to just be there, 9 to 5. So that's just beginning. Odesk Upwork is what they're called now, just filed their S1 this week to get out public. But, I think that whole trend, one of my handle dreams with a productivity company was my to-do list. I could just swipe right and give it to a virtual assistant. And then they would just, check the box when I was done and charge me, a fair hourly rate. But there's a lot of people who could do all the jobs that Shawn and Vicente do on the internet. Like someone else could do that better, faster, cheaper for us. They would be happy. We would be happy. But just the friction needs to get out of the way.
One last question over here.
Yeah, I'm Felipe, grad student data analytics. I have a quick question about Uber's Elevate program, and starting 2023, they will allow cities as Dallas and Los Angeles to push the button. You can actually fly. You have transportation. So I'm aware that you guys are designing a new aircraft, but do you have more information to share on this space? If you do you invest in this space too as an Uber former investor?
We would definitely invest. I can't, disclose anything that's not already public knowledge, but I'm excited about it.
All right, everybody, hands together for Shawn. Thank you.